Hello and welcome to today's KDP University's At Home with Shayne Silvers. Before we get started, hey Shayne,
Hey, how you doing?
good,
Good. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
absolutely. So before we get started, I'm going to take a moment to show you how to get the most out of today's webinar. You can send your questions about KDP to us by clicking on the question icon and typing in your question. We have some team members who will be answering questions about KDP via the chat during today's session. And thank you for all the questions that you submitted during registration. We've loads of questions that were submitted and will be submitted today. And we're going to try to answer several, but we're not going to be able to answer all the questions that we have. Now you can make your presentation full screen by clicking on the 4 arrows at the bottom right of your screen. And if you aren't able to see the icons, you can click on the ellipsis or 3 dots to gain access to them. On Friday, we'll send a follow-up email with the on-demand links to the event recording, or you can follow us on our Kindle Direct Publishing YouTube channel, so you'll be notified when we post new content. The email will also include a link to our upcoming webinars, so you can check those out. I'm Trisha, and for the past 4.5 years, I've moved around Amazon's books teams, learning the business so I can share it with authors. Prior to coming to Amazon, I worked as a graphic artist, project manager, and educator. And when I'm not spending time with my family, painting, or playing in the garden, I'm privileged to work with KDP University team, helping authors use the KDP website to make the most of their author journey. Well, enough about me. We're all here to talk to Shayne. So Shayne's a man of mystery and power, whose power is only exceeded only by his mystery. Oh, I kind of messed that one up, didn't I?
That's all right.
As a paper cut survivor, he chose to avenge himself by writing ebooks. And he cashed in his 401k from his banking job without informing his wife. We'll talk in a minute about how that went over. And published a collection of urban fantasy novels that accidentally hit #1 on all of Amazon. Shayne writes about anti-heroes, those deeply flawed characters who try to make the best to be decent and inspiring in a world gone mad. He also loves to twist up and distort cherished mythological stories and characters in unforgivable ways. For example, his protagonist, Nate Temple, cow-tips the
Minotaur.
Minotaur. I'm struggling this morning. In the first chapter of his first book, Obsidian Sun, and oops, spoiler alert, by the way, that's a hilariously written chapter.
It is.
Shayne was nominated for the Dragon Award for Best Fantasy Novel 2 years in a row, alongside one of his biggest heroes, Jim Butcher. Now, you're not bitter at all, really?
Not bitter at all. I got close.
Well, welcome. We appreciate you being here this morning.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
And it's nice to see other humans with all the craziness going on right now. Because right now I've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old who are unhired help that I can't fire. So they're very diligent in trying to help me, but they normally make things about twice as hard.
Right, right. We often have discussions about the coworkers at my house that
Yep.
are a little more, they make it just a little bit tougher than you normally would. I totally appreciate that.
But
Well, good. Well, we appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us. This is definitely the highlight of my week when I get to sit down and chat with authors.
Yeah, it's fun, and anything I can do to talk to my readers or even other authors, if there's any other authors out here. I know when I was first starting out, I had millions of questions, and I would scour Facebook and YouTube and look for any interview that I could find, any genre, just to pick up that little tidbit that would help push me to the next step. So I love sharing that information.
Perfect, perfect. So first of all, that must have been a heck of a paper cut in order to drive you to turn to be an author.
I was a banker, so I was counting a lot of money and getting a lot of paper cuts. So yeah, it was good to switch to ebooks, much better.
So when is it that when you knew that this was going to be your calling?
So I've always been a reader, and I never took like an English class. I didn't get an MFA. I didn't really practice the craft necessarily. I mean, I did write things, but it was never I was never that guy at the party that was, highbrow talking about, Shakespeare or Charles Dickens or, I was never that guy. I just loved reading in my own time. And
Hmm.
I love fantasy just because it gets you away from the world, use your imagination, and you can just kind of bend the rules a little bit. And I've always been a person that bends the rules. And so I was reading all this fantasy and I got to a point where it wasn't that any of it was bad or anything. It was just that it just kind of felt like a rinse and repeat. And so I wanted to see if there was something I could do that was maybe a little different, maybe a little darker, maybe a little more fun, and just kind of break the mold a little bit. And so I
Hmm.
took a stab at that and wrote Obsidian Sun. I did write one thing before that that was more high fantasy, and that was epic trash compared to Nate Temple now. But I am actually working on that to possibly republish down the road. So I took my
Awesome.
first real stab. Yeah, my first real stab was the Nate Temple series in urban fantasy, and I just wanted to see what would happen. So I sent it to New York. Tried to get some publishers or some agents to publish it for me. And most of them, I didn't really get any feedback that said it was terrible or anything, which is good.
Hmm.
But I got about 100 rejection letters just based on, hey, we've already got a couple fantasy authors like you, or whatever, timing's off. And so
Hmm.
I was kind of disheartened, and then I started looking more into KDP, and I was like, well, why not? Let's give it a try. So
Hmm.
here I am.
So urban fantasy, that's your genre. Do you stick primarily with that, or have you expanded into other genres as well?
Yeah, so I stick with urban fantasy right now. Like I said, I do have a project that's a big project. It's more epic fantasy
Hmm.
that I'd love to crack back open and see what I could do with.
Hmm.
But then, Nate Temple's more urban fantasy, and then I've got a new Shade of Devil series that came out mid last year, and that's urban fantasy, but it's a little darker. It's a vampire kind of origin story.
Gotcha.
Uh, about a character who was actually the real first vampire, and Dracula kind of stole his credit
Hmm.
and took it for himself. So it's kind of a revenge story. And then I've got a couple more series that I'm working on that are also urban fantasy that'll probably be coming out early 2021. So yeah, I
So
stick with
does
urban.
that kind of a sarcastic sense of humor that you see in the Nate Temple series, does that drive through all of your series?
Yeah, it's kind of hard. A lot of people say don't write yourself, and I'm not
Hmm.
saying that I am Nate Temple, but he's got a ton of my characteristics where he's just rebellious for no reason, often to his detriment, and he's always got these kind of snarky one-liners,
Hmm.
sarcastic, cynical nature. And so if I don't have a main character like that, there's a 99% chance that one of the side characters is going to say something smart and
Hmm.
directed towards the protagonist. So there's always going to be that kind of snarky humor
Hmm.
um, just by default. Now I'd have to really try to not have that in it. So, and I try to do
Right.
that a little more with my Shaded Devil series. I try to not have as much of that snark, but there's still some of it in there because
Hmm.
you got to have a mix of all kinds of different characters. So
Right. And that's your voice. Do you find that once you develop that voice, it's just going to carry through all of your books no matter what?
to some extent, I mean, you can manually try to change your voice a little bit.
Hmm.
But if you don't do it the right way, it's going to sound fraudulent.
Hmm.
You have to be true to yourself. You can't like. There's a lot of people that will just hop from genre to genre and try to write what's hot or what's new. And a lot of times you can see right through it 2 chapters in because you can just tell that they're using buzzwords and just not talking organically. The characters are not. And so I definitely you'd have to work really hard to tone down your own voice.
Hmm. That's a really great call out because we do see that frequently is that authors are looking for what the new hot seller is and then try to work towards that. Do you find that your success definitely comes from being true to yourself?
Definitely. So with the Nate Temple series, I wrote that in 2012.
Hmm.
And I was still going to school to get a finance degree to get a big boy job in case my writing hobby didn't pay off. And so I was going to school, I was getting a finance degree, just got married, just had a house. My wife, or I guess she wasn't pregnant at the time, but I had a lot of things going on. I was trying to get a
Hmm.
real job, once I got out of college. And so there was about a 3-year gap where, the Nate Temple book, the first book, was published in 2012, and then it wasn't until 2015 that I was able to take time to write the sequel. And then I started applying some of the marketing principles that I'd learned in school, just, the business aspect of the writing job, because I hadn't become a millionaire overnight yet. I was waiting for that check just to pop up from KDPU, but it didn't happen. So I realized I had to do a little bit more work. It wasn't just writing. And so I started doing some of the marketing in 2016, and within about 10 weeks, my life drastically changed after I started treating it like a business. So the book didn't change. Obsidian Sun, which for 3 years had, maybe made me a couple $100 in 3 years. That book didn't change, but once I applied took advantage of some of the KDP marketing aspects and the discounts and the Kindle Unlimited stuff and free days and, things like that. Once I started doing that, it exponentially exploded. And so it was really, I'm glad that I didn't, talk myself out of it. Like I published the first book and say, man, I must suck, or I must be terrible, must not have this in me. And it would have been very easy to do that after getting 100 rejection letters and then not making any money in 3 years. It would have been really easy to do that. I was just too stubborn to quit. So.
Well, good. We're glad that you were too stubborn to quit, because it seems to have worked out.
Me too. No paper cuts. Well, I still get paper cuts because there's paperbacks, but not as much as counting money all day.
Now, we were just talking about the fact that you did send out all of those letters and you got all the rejection letters back. Is that what drove you to become an independent author?
Yeah. So I've always been just irrationally stubborn. Like once I tell myself that I can do something, I'm just going to keep banging my head against the wall until there's no other option, because that's the only way I can get that thought out of my head. Because I've got this goal card thing that I do, where I'm always reading just ridiculous goals for myself that I set for the next 12 months or 2 years. And so a couple of the ones that I had back then in 2015 were when I walk into a room, people know my name. Readers come up to me all the time and say, can I have your autograph? You're making 6 figures a year. And it was just all these things that were just totally ridiculous at the time, because I was making $150 a year or something. And so it was just kind of ridiculous. Right. Every day I read those to myself out loud. And so I kind of didn't give myself an option to quit, because I'd be calling myself a liar. And so I definitely think that's what drove me over the edge, because even if something negative happened, I would just say, good, that's one less obstacle out of the way. So let's keep going.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about, selling off your 401k and becoming a full-time author. Is that really how it happened?
That's exactly how it happened. So it was probably the end of December 2015, I started hearing about some marketing classes for just Facebook advertising and Amazon advertising. And I had a good job, but it wasn't just piling up cash or anything. It was just paying the bills. And I had a new baby, another one on the way. And so it was a real risk when I looked at this advertising opportunity. But I told myself, well, if you don't do this, you're always going to second guess yourself, like, what if it could have worked? And so I looked at my bank account, saw very limited funds. I looked at my savings account, saw very limited funds. And then I looked at this thing called a 401k, and I was like, well, I don't need that for a couple decades, so let's try that. And so I cashed that in, took the hit, the massive discount that you get taken off. Took that hit, and then I put it all into new covers, advertising spend, new website, email list, just any of the business expenses that you have. And I didn't tell my wife. But within 6 months, it had definitely more than paid for itself. I mean, within 6 months, I was making more as an author than I was at my full-time job. So.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what that journey looked like. As you said, you cashed in and then you paid for things like, so what was your marketing plan at that time? What was it? What were those steps that you took in order to make you that successful in those 6 months?
Yeah, so when I first uploaded the book, that's literally all I did. I put it up there, didn't know anything about copywriting, so my description was basically a query letter, which are boring and dry and terrible. It was a summary of the book. It was just like a fifth grade book report. I mean, it was just terrible. And so I didn't have a good cover. I didn't have good copy. I didn't know what an email list was. And so for the first 6 months of 2016, I started really just treating it like a brand new brick and mortar business, just online. And so my rent was, the website hosting, and I needed to get covers, and I needed to get, just kind of refresh everything, rebrand everything, make sure I had a good editor, make sure the product was polished. And then I allocated most of it towards advertising. It wasn't a ton of money that I had in my 401k because, I was pretty new at working, a real job anyway. And so I just put it into Facebook advertising at the time. And then I started playing with Amazon advertising. But it was, literally all I had to my name was, $5 a day to spend on advertising. That was all I was willing to risk. Because what I was seeing is not $5 a day, but $150 a month. And it was, I had diapers to buy, I had formula to buy, we had all these things. And so it was terrifying. And I was so scared of the financial risks that I slept about 4 hours a night for about 18 months. I would go to work all day, and then I'd spend time with family until they go to bed, and then I would work till 2, 3 in the morning, get 3, 4 hours of sleep, wake up early, start reaching out to Facebook groups, saying, hey, please, check out my book. And I realized that didn't work when you ask people to buy. You got to tell them something funny, and that's where copywriting comes in. So I just started branding and started marketing and started engaging with readers, and changed my life. It just all blew up from there once I started treating it like a business.
That's a really good call out. And I think that that's one of the things that we try to communicate as well. Let's go back to, you said you put a professional cover on. Now, is that something you designed yourself, or did you?
No. And I see that you're obviously a designer. So know what happens when a rookie tries to go into Photoshop or something and they think what they made is the next Mona Lisa, and it's really a kindergarten crayon drawing. So I definitely knew enough that I didn't want to try that. And so I looked online. I didn't have enough money to buy like a fancy cover. I think I spent maybe a couple $100. And I found a good, you have to balance the cost versus the return. And so I tried to get the best I could for my money. But I did go professional because I know that there's some things you can fudge and there's some things you can't. So in the digital world, you do judge a book by its cover. And
exactly.
It's as simple as that. So.
Right. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to dig a little deeper. We do have people that are like brand new to the publishing scene, and this is something that we get asked is, where do you find that cover artist? Where do you find,
Yeah, so one thing back then, there's a lot more designers now, I think, than there was when I was looking. But I would go to Pinterest and I would look up wizards or werewolves or whatever, and I would start looking at designers, or I would look up favorite authors. And then I would do like a Google search for that image, or see if I could find credits in the back of any books that would reference a different design firm, or I would just Google, cover designers. But I really had to look at the product that they had too, because like I said, most of them were out of my price range. And so, so I just started digging any way I could. I would go to Barnes and Noble and walk the aisles and look at what's kind of catchy and what's new and say, okay, well, I kind of want that aspect or that font or, whatever. And so I just accumulated this library of concepts that I would say, okay, well, this fits urban fantasy, or no, this is more paranormal romance, or you just have to do some research and, understand the market. And I definitely didn't at that point because my books weren't selling. So I was doing something wrong. So it took a little bit of humility to realize that I didn't know everything. And so that's when you just go back to school essentially, and you start going through the basics, and you say, okay, here's a bunch of covers. These look cool. These ones are selling really well. Why are they selling well? Is it the color? Is it the concept of the character, the pose? Is it, what is it? And then you look at the copy, and you have to go to the copy and you look at other successful authors in your genre. And you say, okay, well, they're kind of doing this, or they're kind of doing that, or they make it humorous, or they make it, whatever, serious or scary. And so you just kind of find what's appropriate for your style book, and you try to learn from the people who did it already. I mean, that's what wisdom is learning from those who have gone before you. So
Hmm.
don't copy. You got to make it yourself, because if you try to copy it, people will read through that too. If they read the
Right.
copy, the back blurb, and then the first page of your chapter is totally different voice, they're gonna know. And
Hmm.
so you have to make it yourself. But yes, it's all about research.
The other thing that you brought up was editing. Now, before you published the first time, did you have an editor or no?
I thought I did. Apparently, it wasn't a very good one. But it was a lot of self-editing at that point, to be honest. And then I had a couple friends that took some editing or English classes that decided to help me. And so there was a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of little simple things. I didn't know about, advanced reader teams, having a beta team to kind of proofread your book. I didn't know about any of this stuff. And so that's kind of in 2016 when I kind of rehauled everything and said, okay, let's get a real editor. Let's get some beta readers. Let's just go from start to finish. What am I doing wrong? Because whatever I'm doing right now isn't working. So
Mhm. Can you talk a little bit about beta readers? What's a beta reader and why are they important?
yeah, so beta readers are, there's a couple different ways. So um, there's an alpha team, that's what I call it anyway. An
Hmm.
alpha team would go through the book after your editor. So you write your first draft, you do your own self-editing, review it, make sure it's all good. Then what I do is I send it to my editor and they
Hmm.
clean it up. And they make all their suggestions, and then I go back through it, agree, disagree, accept, reject, whatever. And then you need to send it to a fresh set of eyeballs after you've made all those changes, because sometimes when you accept the change, you make a second typo, or there's no double spacing, or there's a big gap between paragraphs, and so you send it to a proofreading team. Could be a couple people. It needs to be someone objective, so not your mom, not a family member, not a best friend. It needs to be someone who will tell you the truth.
Hmm.
And they'll read it for errors, but they'll also read it just to kind of tell you, hey, he was wearing a red shirt in chapter 3, and he's wearing a sweater in chapter 4.
Hmm.
Um, Little things like that you're so close to the story you might have missed, because you're
Right.
thinking about the conflict and the end of the book and all these side characters, and you can miss things like that. And so
Hmm.
they just kind of they catch some of those things. And then there's what's called a beta team, which takes a little bit more time to develop, and that would be kind of your super fans.
Hmm.
You get a handful of them to read it, and hey, if you liked it, leave an honest review on Amazon. Tell your friends about it if you liked it, and just kind of build the hype and just spread the word. Really, just the marketing team. So
Gotcha. So that's a really good. So with the team, so it's a few different people, right?
yeah.
Which of them are paid positions and which of them aren't, or are they all paid? Do you pay all
So
these people?
so this is kind of a new process that I'm doing. Like, I used to just
Mhm.
have a beta team, and I would send them a free ARC advanced reader's copy of the book, and then I would do a bunch of giveaways just for them once the book actually launched. So I would
Mhm.
try to give contests and giveaways and books and Kindles and whatever, and have a bunch of just different goodies. But now I've started setting up this alpha team where they're actually kind of working. And so I'm trying to come up right now with a good way to take care of them, whether that's
Mhm.
sending them a Kindle, a new Kindle, or um, a cost per book, like, hey, here's, X dollars, or here's a gift card to Amazon. Thanks for helping, whatever it is. But definitely with the alpha team, I mean, they're reading a pretty raw copy, and they're not about promoting or anything. They're about working, basically a second edit
Right.
path. So yeah, I'm just still kind of entertaining that, but I try to take care of them as much as I can. On launch days, I'm
Mhm.
always giving away tons of stuff, tons of free signed books and Kindles and anything else I can think of.
Mhm.
So try to take care of them.
Awesome.
Yeah. And actually, one of the other things I can mention is one of the giveaways that I did. I've done it a couple times now. Is Cameo inside the books, and so whatever the
Gotcha.
contest is, if they win, they get to be a character in one of the next books. And so
Mhm.
I've got two people right now that are waiting to be written into one of my upcoming books that I'm about to announce this week. And so they're really excited. They've been pestering me for a while, like, hey, you haven't put me in your book yet. And so I've already got their characters formed, and I know what they're going to be, what they're going to do. I just had to get my other characters to that point so they could meet these people. But it's fun. There was there was a kid, I won't say his name, but the parents are really big readers of mine, and they really liked my stories,
Mhm.
just some of the things that Nate Temple goes through. It was really kind of motivational and inspiring to them. And
Mhm.
they told me about their son who had a really serious and rare condition. And he was all sorts of
Mhm.
health issues. And so what I did, he won the contest, the father did. And he said, "Hey, I
Mhm.
don't want to be in the books, but maybe you could put my son in there." And so I put his son, little kid, under 10. I put him as like this brave little boy who stands up to the big boss at the very end,
Mhm.
and kind of verbally slaps him around a little bit and acts brave
Mhm.
and tough, even though he stands no chance. And then my main character steps in and says, "Hey kid, thanks. You're brave. Thanks. Let me take care of it from here." So his son was kind of immortalized in these books.
Right.
And a really cool line, and it was like related to one of his favorite shows. And so, there's little things like that that you can do to engage the readers and really just kind of make it personal as opposed to just a
Mhm.
book. So,
Right. Right. And I love the fact that you think creatively, because we were talking about how it can be a little overwhelming, when you're not bringing in a whole lot to find these unique marketing
yeah,
solutions. And so
yeah.
being able to honor your readers, and especially that niche reader group,
Mhm.
that's just like they have your back no matter what, being
Yeah,
able to
it's
do that
like
amazing.
a street gang.
Yeah. Um, so if you had to identify one thing that you wish people understood about self-publishing, what would it be?
One of the biggest things that I see is like the misconception that indie publishing is subpar. Um,
Mhm.
that's a really old kind of stereotype that's kind of haunted indie publishers, because back in the day, and even now to some extent, anyone can publish, but it won't sell.
Right.
So the authors that are actually selling, it doesn't matter whether they're indie or traditional, they're selling enough copies to get noticed by the biggest book website in the world.
Mhm.
So the indie traditional aspect doesn't matter anymore. And I see so many authors that, I mean, technically they write better books than a lot of the traditional, because it's more raw, it's more relevant. Because
Mhm.
with publishing, if I have an idea right now, that I think is appropriate or timely or whatever, I can write
Right.
it right now and publish it right now. Whereas with traditional publishing, oftentimes it's 12 to 18 months ahead. And so the relevant thing that they were hoping to write about maybe isn't relevant anymore. And so
Mhm.
I think people just kind of need to get that, that idea out of their head that there's any difference between indie and traditional. All you
Mhm.
need to do is look at who's selling. I mean, that's an
Mhm.
indicator of what readers are buying, and that's the most important thing. It's not about where it comes from, it's about what the readers think.
Do you feel like we talked a lot about your authentic voice? Do you feel like you get to keep more of your authentic voice by publishing being an indie publisher?
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things is that there's a lot of aspects of my books that could be toned down, or I could be told to amplify.
Mhm.
Just kind of taking it away from my creation to kind of a co-op. And so
Mhm.
there's aspects of the indie publishing world that are just amazing for someone like me, that I don't like group projects. I never have. And so it's nice to kind of be my own boss and be the one who has to make all those decisions.
Mhm. Now we've talked a lot about Nate Temple,
Mhm.
and you have a compilation coming out. You've got 4 books. It's the Nate Temple series books,
Yeah.
0 through 3. That's releasing this month.
No, it's actually been out for a while. I've got a
Okay.
couple new books coming out, but I didn't have the launch dates available, and I'm actually probably going to be announcing those tomorrow. But
Okay.
this book was really just a way to, um, when I was first starting, is to get people to check out the whole series, or a big chunk of the
Mhm.
series, and be affordable, because
Mhm.
back then there was some financial pressure, just on recession type stuff that was kind of fading. And I said, well, this would be a good way to get people to check out my series,
Mhm.
um, really get a taste of it as opposed to just kind of sipping the first book. Um,
Mhm.
kind of dive in and check out the whole thing. And then they realize that, hey, this is actually really cool. Because one of the biggest things is I write a character that's he's unlikable in a way. Like there's a lot of aspects about him that are very arrogant and just kind of put off it. And that was intentional. I wanted to write a character that wasn't, I think I even told you this, that wasn't like a Frodo Baggins. He was more like a Gollum, in a way where he's already kind of a bad person and he has to become better. So I always thought those stories were kind of more relevant to people because we've all got our own vices and we're trying to overcome our own inner demons. And so it was kind of nice to write a character that he's got a bunch of flaws that he doesn't realize he has, and then to have him chip away at those and become a better person. But to that effect, it's a gradual thing. So the first book, sometimes people might say, oh, he's just a jerk. And then they don't read book 2, which is when he gets knocked off his pedestal. And so I really wanted to give him a fair shake where people say, oh, okay, I guess the author did this on purpose. And so I decided to make a box set where they could get a real glimpse at why I made him that way.
That's a really good call out. And I have to admit, I totally did not like him in your first book. He's just
That's the point. He's a jerk. In the very beginning, he's an absolute jerk. And that's the whole point. And everyone sees him that way. And he doesn't have a heart of gold, but he's got a heart of something better, a little bit better than dark. And so he's trying to be better. He's just ignorant. He doesn't realize how he's coming across. And so it's fun to knock him off his pedestal in book 1 a little bit, book 2 completely. I mean, he just gets knocked down the mountain and he has to climb his way back up, and he's really humble. The whole book is about being humbled in book 2. And so I wanted to give people a chance to see that it was intentional.
Good call out. Yeah. Sorry, I just had a moment where I had a question and I lost it.
No problem.
I know what it was. So your books are in Kindle Unlimited, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things we talk to authors about is the difference between going with Kindle Unlimited or KDP Select and versus going what we call wide, which is because with Kindle Unlimited, you're exclusive while your books and your ebooks are enrolled in KDP Select. Can you talk about that decision, why you decided that was the route for you?
Yeah, so when I first started in 2012, I put it on Kindle or KDP, and I didn't have a ton of sales. I had a couple, friends and family would buy it or something. And then I said, okay, well, maybe Kindle's not the only way to go. And so I tried wide very briefly. I tried going to iBooks and Nook and things like that. And you lose some of the benefits with Amazon, but you maybe get a bigger audience. That was my thought back then. And it failed miserably. Nothing changed. And so I started looking at some of the data, and I realized, as a banker, I started looking at some of the data, like I was telling you when I kind of reanalyzed everything. And I said, well, Amazon owns between 75 and 85% of the market for readers. So why would I make my job 5 times harder by having 5 different platforms to manage to only get 15% of the market? So work 5 times harder for a big drop in Amazon and then another 15%. It didn't make any sense. And so I doubled down on Amazon. And it's just a better product. It goes to more readers. They've got subscription services, kind of like Netflix for books, where you can just pay a monthly fee and you can essentially get as many books as you can read in the Kindle library or the Kindle Select library. And so it made more sense for me, and it made more sense for my readers. So I always try to make my decisions that way.
That's a good call out. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now we've talked a lot about marketing. Can you give us a step-by-step book launch? So, we talked to a lot of authors and they say that their marketing strategy changes a little bit through the years. And so we've talked a little bit about how you started marketing your book, but talk us through, when you're launching a book today, what does that look like?
Yeah, so when I'm launching a book today, we'll go from the fact that it's already done. The book's already written. I write pretty fast, so I can probably write 100,000 word book in 2 to 3 weeks, and then I'll probably edit it for a week myself, and then it'll go to the editor who has it for probably a week max, depending on her schedule. And so within 4 to 5 weeks, it's completely done, tops.
Mhm.
So what I'm doing now is I'm announcing it ahead of time to get pre-orders, because I was seeing that a lot of people actually prefer to do that. I never did as a reader. I didn't like to pre-order things. I would just wait till it came out. But apparently there was a big market for people who plan out their reading adventures. And I'm not a planner in any sense of the word, so I never considered that. And so now I'm doing that. But I'll set up the pre-order, and then once probably about a week, a couple weeks before, I'll be sending out an email maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, just kind of reminding people, posting some of the reviews that maybe the advanced team has thought about or has sent me, posting kind of relevant, artwork or cover reveals. I'll basically have about a week to 2 weeks of social media things, whether it's a snippet of the audiobook that I post, or, a quick question and answer with Shayne, or an Ask Me Anything with Shayne on Facebook Live. I'll basically just try to do a bunch of marketing material for the readers where I'm engaging with them. And, if there's a Minotaur in the book, then I might post a bunch of cool Minotaur pictures, or, I'll just kind of find relevant themes that apply to the book. And hey, you guys really need to check this out. There's a really funny scene with this guy. And, I'll just kind of build the hype myself, and I'll hopefully use my advanced team to do the same. They're kind of posting like, oh my God, I laughed so hard, or, this was so funny, or this part's so sad, like without spoilers, hopefully. But I'll just try to get them to build excitement. And then on launch day, I kind of double down and I'll start doing advertising on Facebook, putting out several different ads to, my readers to remind them, and then new readers to tell them about my books. And maybe it's for book 1, or hey, book 10 just came out in this series. Make sure you go back and get the box set, or, things like that. And so I'll really start the marketing campaign and send out more emails. The advanced team will start jumping in and really pushing it. I'll have a bunch of contests and giveaways for my Facebook group that's got about 8,000 members. I'll probably do like a live reading for chapter 1. There's just all sorts of, and anything you can do to engage with the readers and make it not about selling a product, but involving them on a fun story. And so that's always the aspect I try to take, is that, hey, hang out with me. There's something really cool happening, almost like it's a pool party or something.
Right.
And I'll just try to engage them and involve them, run a bunch of giveaways, and hey, I'm doing a cameo, and hey, I'm doing this, or I'm giving away, 30 signed books, or, whatever it is. But I'll just hang out with them for a week to 2 weeks and really just talk to them. I'll have a spoiler room where I can answer questions, or, all that kind of stuff. So just a ton of engagement is my marketing plan.
Primarily on Facebook, or do you use other social media channels as well?
Primarily Facebook. I'm starting to play around with some of the others, but I'm not very savvy with them yet. So I'm still kind of learning, Instagram and all this stuff. I didn't think I was old, but apparently I'm really old. So I'm trying to learn Instagram and some of these other ones, and just see where the readers are, because that's all I really care about, is wherever the readers are, I want to be there. So.
Right. So if you had to pick out one thing that you found most surprising about self-publishing a book when you first started, what was it?
It was how easy it is. I was going through the process initially of traditional publishing, and this was years ago, so it was very dated back then, but it could be completely different now. But the process was just, okay, you got to learn how to write a query letter, and it has to be this font, and it has to be this way. Well, this agent doesn't like it this way, and this agent does like it this way. And there's so many little hoops and hurdles and things you got to figure out. And that's just to send them a query letter. And then you got to send them a synopsis, and the synopsis has to be perfect, and it can't do this, and it has to do this. And there's all these just rules everywhere you go. And I've never been good with rules or bureaucracy of any kind, or authority of any kind. And so I just kind of figured all that out on my own based on reader feedback. What do the readers want? And I put that in my book. And then I went to Amazon and gave them that information, and within 5 to 10 minutes I uploaded it. And then within 24 to 72 hours, I think. It's normally faster than that, but I think that's what we have to say. It's live. So it's live on Amazon, and you can tell your friends about it, or you can You can even share a sample of it with look inside feature. I mean, there's all sorts of things that Amazon does to help you. And it's just so simple compared to trying to go the
Mhm.
traditional route. So,
Okay. Let's see, we've got some questions coming in, so I'm gonna try to see if we can figure out some questions to ask you. This is an interesting one. We talked about the editor. For a new author who doesn't have a budget for an editor, what would you suggest for an editing source? You use some friends, I take it.
yeah, initially I've been there. I've been in the same boat. I didn't have any money to do any of this stuff. And so what I did is, I mean, that's where you have to be innovative. And so you start going on Facebook. You go to reader groups, and I mean, you'd be amazed at how much there is on social media, how easy it is to connect with the right people. What I would do, because I didn't have money, is I would go to some of these Facebook groups of fantasy readers or
Mhm.
editors, and I would say, hey, could you proofread this for me, and I'll give you a signed paperback, or um, please, pretty please, just do this for me, whatever. I'll pay you back someday. You just do whatever you can. Or if you have friends and family, I mean, some editing is better than none.
Mhm.
And there's actually a lot of software now that kind of does a lot of it for you. So you can learn kind of the highlights of editing yourself online. You
Mhm.
can find blog articles that teach you kind of the top 10 rules to edit, and then you just apply that as best you can to your book yourself, and then hope for the best. And then you just commit to, once I make $100 in sales or $200 in sales, I'm getting a new cover. Once I make $400 in sales, I'm going to hire an editor.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, you start setting those goals. And instead of, like, one of the biggest things I did with my business is, even when I was making good money, I didn't pay myself anything
Mhm.
um, for a long time. I would reinvest it right into the books again, and I would get better covers or a better editor or better website, or whatever it was that I was lacking in, or better email service, or just anything like that. I didn't pay myself anything, so people
Mhm.
were seeing that I was doing really well in sales, and they think that I was just Scrooge McDucking, rolling around in money. But I was putting literally every penny of it back into the business to advertise or to do whatever it
Mhm.
was that I couldn't do before. And so that's what happens when you treat a business like a business. It'll pay like a business.
Mhm.
If you treat it like a hobby, it'll pay like a hobby. And so
Mhm.
I wanted it to be a lifelong thing. And so I focused on the foundation, and whatever shortcuts I had to take in the beginning, I tried to fix immediately once I got some money. So you just bootstrap it. You do whatever you can.
Mhm. It's a really good call out about how to run it as a business. I think that's the biggest challenge for some new authors to make that transition from artist to business owner.
Hard. It's very hard because creative people are not typically analytical, or
Mhm.
left and the right side of the brain. And a lot of creative people don't have the skill sets on the other side, or a lot of analytical people don't have the creative aspect. I luckily had both. But if you
Mhm.
only have one or the other, that's where you network, and you find someone who could help you in that other field,
Mhm.
um, by any means necessary. And so it is hard to switch off your creative hat and put on your accounting hat or your advertising hat or design hat, whatever. It's difficult. It's a business. And that's what I think a lot of people overlook, is that they think, like I did, you hit publish, become a millionaire. It's not the case. It's not at all the case. I mean, it could happen, but go buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't treat it that way, or else you're not going to last, even if you do blow up. So
Mhm. Those are some really good call outs. And I think that the next kind of call out from that is um, have you ever joined read or author groups, or because you said you don't necessarily do projects well with other people, but a lot of new authors find that they can join an author group and swap services. Like they'll I'll edit yours if you edit mine. Did you
yeah,
find that? Did you try that and was that successful for you?
yeah. I mean, back when I was bootstrapping, there was definitely times that I had to do group projects, unfortunately.
Right.
And not unfortunately, because they were bad people. It's just because I don't like that aspect of work. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things that I would jump into reader groups or author groups and say, hey, how do you do a copyright page? Or hey, how do you do this? And you know, here's what I'm good at. Let me tell you if I can help you with that. So in some instances, yeah, it is. That's the benefit of social media. You're literally connected to anyone in the world.
Right.
On the other hand, there's some aspects of sharing that I didn't want to be a part of, just because I didn't like it as a reader. And so every decision I make, I put myself in the shoes of a reader and what I would want. And so when it comes to covers, I apply the reader, you know, the reader glasses, where I say, what would a reader think? What does a reader want? Or what do they don't want? And so when it came to like email lists, for example, a lot of people kind of swap email lists or market to each other's email lists. I've done it a couple times, and I just don't like it, because I didn't like it when some stranger showed up in my email inbox. Even if it's a good
Right.
story, I didn't like it. I already had a bad taste in my mouth. They could have been the best author in the world. I already had a bad taste in my mouth. So unless there was some kind of personal connection where, you know, both authors knew each other and they're always talking online and you kind of get a warm introduction that way, then that would be different. But the whole swapping and buying email lists and all that stuff, I never liked that as a reader. So I tried not to do anything like that as an author. And I just kind of treat everything in my business that way. That what would a reader.
So how did you develop your email list then if you know, didn't purchase lists or, you know, market to other authors?
Yeah, so one thing that I did back in the day is, since I didn't want to do that very much, is I wrote a novella. And so I realized that I could put a novella out there for free on my website, you know, 25,000 words, just make it a real fun introduction to Nate Temple, where he's, you know, a younger Nate Temple in college. And it's just kind of like a Lethal Weapon 4 introduction scene, you know, where it's just like stupidly hilarious and crazy and just off the rails. And so I wrote a fun story called Fairy Tale. And I made an ebook, and I, you know, treated it like I was going to make money on it, and I wasn't going to put it on Amazon or anything. And I just said, hey, if you want a free book to check out my writing and see if you like my humor, my tone, you know, the characters, whatever, here's a free ebook. Sign up for my list. Unsubscribe at any time, no problem at all. But I'd love to talk to you. And if you have any questions, email me and I'll answer personally. And so I really just try to involve them, like, hey, I'm a human. You know, you have this preconceived notion of what authors are, because you never get to talk to authors a lot of times in a traditional setting. And I didn't like that as a reader. I loved going to book signings and having 10 seconds to talk to Jim Butcher or, you know, whatever.
Right.
I love that. And so I tried to do that via email or Facebook and say, hey, look, here's a free ebook. And if you hated it, shoot me an email, roast me, tell me. I'll respond, and I'll probably troll you right back and have fun with it. But that's the thing, is like, you can tell me how you feel, and I love it. Good, bad, ugly, whatever. Just I'll engage with you. And so I just kind of made it, you know, I'm going to give you something for signing up for the list, as opposed to, you know, just swapping newsletters or something like that.
Well, Robert wants to know, have you checked out Twitch yet?
I've heard of it. I haven't checked it out as an author. I have looked at it, and I'm trying to think of how I could use something like that as an author, and maybe like for like live readings, or, you know, there's so many social media platforms that have benefits, but it's all about time management. So you get to the point that you're focused so much on you as an author and engaging with readers that you're not writing anything. And so it's a balancing act, no matter where you are in the journey, whether you're just starting out or you've been doing this for a couple of years, you're always balancing something. And so I'm trying to find ways to prioritize social media so that I can still engage with readers, but not overcommit to where I'm on 20 different platforms, and, you know,
Right.
I don't want to do that, because it just doesn't, it's not organic. I can't do that. If I had 24 hours in a day, I can't do that. I can't only manage 24 social media sites, or even 10. So I'm working on that. I'm trying to find ways to expand, but do it where it's organic and it's really me. It's not someone just posting random things in my name. I don't want to get to that point. So
Right. I think that that's one of the things that I talk about a lot is to be authentic to yourself. And if
yes,
it's not something you're comfortable with, even though you do have some readers there, it's not
yep,
going to be successful because you're not going to keep up with it.
exactly, exactly. If it's
Mhm.
not part of your voice, don't do it. So
Yep.
when I first started, I didn't know Twitter, I didn't know Instagram, and so I
Mhm.
said, well, I'm not gonna pretend to know something I don't. I know Facebook a little bit, so let me try that. And then once I got Facebook down, I said, okay, well, now I can start goofing around on Instagram.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm kind of learning how to do that. And then there's a couple others that I'm looking at right now. And so there's always something, but if you're going to go in, you need to go all in and really be authentic, like you said, because readers will
Mhm.
see through. Readers are sharp.
Yep.
They're smart. They can tell when it's not really you posting things, and they can tell
Mhm.
when you're just doing it to do it. And
Mhm.
I didn't like that when I was a reader again. So I try to stick true to myself.
So Melissa, the whiskey guru, I'm hoping that means something to you, wants
Yeah.
to know what's on your necklace.
Oh, that's it's a coin from Alexander the Great. It's a drachma that it's an authentic drachma that was uncovered, and, obviously repolished and reworked, but it's the coin that he used when he was taking over the world. It's the currency he had. So I like that.
Very
I like
inspirational.
Alexander the Great's one of my heroes. So.
Gotcha. All right. So Carol wants to know how long do you plan on writing Nate Temple? She's hoping it's forever.
So Nate Temple's probably going to be 20. I'm thinking 25 books,
Okay.
and I'm coming up on book 15 right now, and that'll probably come out at the end of the year. I'm going to be doing an announcement for probably the next 6 months worth of books, and I'm
Hmm.
sure Nate's going to be on there, and then I'm going to be announcing a new series in 2021. But yeah, I would say Nate Temple's probably going to be 25 books, and the crossover series, there's the Feathers and Fire series, that'll probably be about 25 books, and same with the Phantom Queen diaries. Since they're all in the same universe, it's probably going to be pretty similar with how many
Gotcha.
books series. So a
Okay.
big one. So I guess between the three series, it'll be like 75 books or something, which is crazy. But
That's a lot. That's a lot of reading.
there's a lot of story to tell. So
All right. I think we answered that.
I'm just going to lean away to get a drink real quick.
No, go for it. This is an excellent question. Do you worry about beta readers stealing your ideas when you ask them to edit?
Yeah, it's a concern, and it's happened to me before. And so I've got processes in place now that I won't tell how I do it so it doesn't get broken, but I can, most of the time I can tell who did it. And so I have a very limited list of ARC members.
Hmm.
And they're all kind of personally vetted to some extent where I know them, I've worked with them, or they've interacted a lot in the group. I've just kind of got a personal vetting process. And then in the ebook itself, the ARC copy, I've got some security measures in place that
Hmm.
kind of let me find out who leaked what, if, and I think it's only happened a couple times.
Hmm.
I mean, at least from the ARC team, there's been a lot of that is a risk even after it's published. Pirating is real. I mean,
Hmm.
it happens with videos, it happens with images, it happens with books, it happens with everything. So can't defeat it entirely, but I do try to stamp down on it as quickly as
Hmm.
possible.
Okay, that's a good call out. What's your greatest inspiration throughout your writing journey?
So, like as an author, like what authors are my inspiration, maybe? Um,
Sure.
okay, so Jim Butcher was a big inspiration, just because at the time he was a lot different than a lot of the urban fantasy out there. A lot of them were kind of more serious and gritty and kind of darker, at least in my opinion, what I read anyway. But Jim Butcher was kind of a mix of a little bit of humor, cool background, maybe fantasy stuff you didn't know about, different tropes and myths and whatever. And so I really enjoyed reading that. But then on a bigger picture, just fantasy in general, Robert Jordan was fantastic at story
Yeah,
building.
The Wheel of
He
Time, yeah.
really was. I mean, it's an effort to read those books, but
Hmm.
if if you can commit to it, there's just some, as an author, it's inspiring because
Mhm.
the amount of work that he had to put into some of his world building and character building, it's just unreal. I mean,
Mhm.
like each city has its own culture, its own clothing styles, its own type of food. I mean, he basically wrote a history book.
Right.
Um, and it's still a cool story. The characters are still fun. And so
Mhm.
he's pretty incredible. And then Brandon Sanderson obviously finished off that series excellently well.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would say those two as authors. And then just on a personal level, like I said, Alexander the Great was one of my biggest heroes, and then Achilles. I just thought those were really cool characters from history. So
Nice.
I guess I lean towards the Greeks because it's Leonidas, Achilles, and Alexander. So
All right. Um, so you mentioned audiobook briefly. You mentioned that do you release your audiobook at the same time you release your paperback and ebook?
so I'm not professional enough to do that. I'm still working on how to make that happen because the problem is I, I I thought I was getting better at it, but then
Uh-huh.
some hiccup happens. So the thing with audiobooks is you have to really plan ahead because you have to have your book done and edited and proofread and then sent to the narrator and plan their schedule into your launch. And they have to be done 14 days before the launch. They have to have it uploaded 14 days before the launch date. So there's a ton more on the timeline that you have to manage. And the smallest thing can throw that off. So like nowadays with the coronavirus and everyone getting sent home for a period,
Mhm.
that changed a bunch of schedules. And so there was a bunch
Yeah.
of things I was trying to do concurrently that just hit roadblocks or I wasn't able to hit a deadline or someone else wasn't able to hit a deadline. And so I haven't been able to do it yet, but I do want to. And I think
Mhm.
it's the best solution for a reader too, because
Mhm.
I always cringe and feel a little guilty when I'm launching an ebook in a print and I'm just waiting for how many minutes it's going to take before someone says, "When's the audiobook due?" And I'm like, I know, stop yelling at me. And so I really hate that. And so I'm trying to make it, I'm trying to be more adult and get that in line, but it is difficult.
Yeah, it's challenging. The audiobooks take a minute to publish. More so,
Yep. They have to
it's
go,
a different timeline.
yeah, they have to go through their own recording, then editing themselves, and then ACX and Audible have to edit it or check it, proofread it essentially. And so there's a lot of steps that you have to
Mhm.
consider. You miss
Right.
one step and then you miss the deadline. So
Right.
I'm working on it. I'm trying to get that done.
All right, we have time for just a couple more questions.
Oh.
Um, Rebecca wants to know, do you start a series knowing how it will end?
So a lot of people always ask me that with the Nate Temple series. And yes, to some extent. Now it's all fluid at the same time though. So I know generally where I wanted Nate to go, and I knew
Hmm.
certain milestones that I wanted him to hit. But there's definitely happy accidents that happen as you're writing, where they could meet a certain character or come across a certain person that just changes everything, or it changes how you are going to get to a certain place. And so I've had the ultimate bad guy in mind for a while. And it's gotten better with time because I can make that bad guy, I don't want to give any spoilers, but I can make him even better and more dangerous and everything. As the series has gone on, I've been able to think of ways to make it better. So to some extent,
Hmm.
yes, but don't beat yourself up trying to follow a timeline because if you're sitting there following a checklist, your book is going to read like a checklist and it's going to be very
Hmm.
dry and readers are not going to have a lot of fun. So I try to focus on character development first above all. If the characters aren't
Hmm.
organic and authentic, then your book's just a Cliff's Notes. So I don't want to do
Right.
that.
Okay. Um, how do you get the confidence to write books? Where did
Lie,
that come from?
you lie to yourself. So you have to. I mean, that's all there is to it.
Hmm.
Like I told you before, I had those goal cards. I mean, there was no reason I should think that I was good enough to publish a book. There was absolutely zero reason to believe that. And so I just told myself I told myself I already was successful. I already was a big deal. I already did write bestsellers. And you have to lie to yourself, because if you're not going to lie to yourself about that, you're going to be in the back of your head, you're going to be telling yourself, you'll never make it. You'll never make it. You're not good enough. You're going to have those thoughts either way. So I just try to counteract them with positive lies instead.
Okay. So very last question, because we're at time, but um, we have one attendee who wants to know, uh, is your Nate Temple series really an autobiography?
Yes, yes, it is. You caught me.
On that note,
Shayne Silvers is just a pen name. My real name's Nate Temple.
there you go. All right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. A special thank you to you, Shayne, for your time and really some great information.
Yeah,
And thank you to everyone who took the time out to join us today.
yeah. And if any authors have any other questions that they want to pick my brain on anything, just send me an email, find me on Facebook. I try to respond to everything as quick as I can. So
Mhm.
just hit me up.
Awesome. Well,